Okay, so the brief I had for today was essentially kind of it's part kind of background, family, where I've come from, and then obviously partly then is a kind of a career progression pathway and where I am now, what I've learned maybe over the last 10 or 15 years. So the first bit is going to start off with a bit more of the kind of like the background, and then I'll get on to something that's probably more relevant and interesting and meaningful, hopefully from your point of view. I'll kind of, for those who don't know, I think everybody here knows who I am actually. I'm the head of finance. We've got a finance team of 8, very hard-working people. Business partners Daisy, Peter, and Andrew, and the accountants Sarah, Magda, and Seb, and Mark are, as it turns out to be, came in as a kind of a general, and you've kind of ended up being a specialist on Oracle. So that's kind of the team, and what we do kind of day to day is very much kind of in the background. So there's a lot of hard, complex technical work that goes on that often doesn't, or very often doesn't get kind of flagged up or recognized, except when it goes wrong. So there's kind of, like I guess from a HR point of view as well, a lot happens in the background. You don't hear about it, you don't know about it until something big happens, and it can be significant because a lot of what we do is driven by regulations, statutes, accounting principles, and things like that. And we deal a lot with auditors, HMRC, and things. So it's kind of, as I said, the team work away incredibly hard, incredibly diligently. Very proud of that. But it's all quiet work. It's like a duck analogy. Kind of, there's a lot of, looks calm on the surface potentially, or a lot of the time it does. But under the surface, there's a lot going on. So then, kind of, that was just a brief introduction to me, the team, and what we're doing, kind of broadly. In terms of kind of where I've come from, so I think the brief said something about what's formed you, what were the influences, things like that. And in kind of hopefully not getting too soppy or whatever like that, but basically kind of like the biggest influence for me, or my biggest influence, has been my mum, because when we were younger, my dad died, and she kind of raised 5 of us on her own. And she just switched over from, she had her own life, and then suddenly she didn't. So she raised us, and we were 5 energetic kids. So how she managed that was she got us involved in every sport she could to just burn off our energy. So whether it was like team sports, swimming, individual sports, music, whatever it was, we were doing it. And I think kind of that was just the way of life until, all the way we were growing up and things like that. I think from that kind of a couple of things came out. One was I love variety, so not very good at anything in particular, but I like trying different things. So kind of I was a jack of all trades, master of none type analogy. Also as well, kind of like a realization that even though I wasn't very good at some things, I did incredibly enjoy the training and taking part and things like that. So the kind of the hard work does pay off. It's something that absolutely came from the sporting side of things. And also as well, kind of that kind of, as I said, that selfless act is very meaningful to me and things like that. So they were kind of the formative things. I think I've taken that into the career side of things in terms of I've always liked variety, I've always liked change, I like doing different things, I like seeing different things. I like kind of being outside of a comfort zone as well. I think the competitiveness I did have as a youngster has been reined in. So when I was younger, whether it was a game of cards, whether it was walking to the bus stop first, whatever it might be, I had to be first. That you don't see as often now, but there's still that kind of want to do well, want the team to do well, and things like that is still there. So kind of they're some of the formative things I suppose that went on, and also the importance of family. And family for me is kind of the reason for everything. So a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, I was very kind of carefree, happy, enjoying life. And then, these little kids came along. And there's kind of, I don't know if you can see that very well, but there's a family as it currently stands. And like I said, kind of like work's incredibly important to me, friends are incredibly important to me, but actually the basis for everything I do is kind of family and things like that. So the guys in my team probably are seeing that quite a lot at the moment, as half term comes up or terms come up where I have to do more pick up and drop off and try to get that whole balance right as well. So that's something kind of, as I said, that I suppose I don't live to work, I work to live essentially, and things like that. And outside, work's incredibly important to me. But outside of work is equally as important as well. And I think the guys always hear me, like if I've had a sleepless night, like last night where the little one was up, all night long. I'll come in, I'll be tired, I'll be a bit grumpy, you might hear about it, I might moan about it. But I wouldn't change it for the world, which is a bizarre thing I can't quite reconcile with myself. So there's the little one that was up all last night. She was jumping around on the sofa all evening and then in the bed all night. And then I had a quiet time a couple of weeks ago where I was trying to watch Alistair Brownlee and his brother win the Leeds triathlon. I do a lot of triathlons, so I'm quite into that. And fantastically, my kids decided to reenact the whole thing. So they kind of came in, saw what I was doing, and were looking at TV, and then they went away, came back in with their little swimsuits on. So they were swimming on the ground for about 20 minutes. They ran around the house for about an hour as the cycling was going on. And then this is them jogging for probably about 50 minutes in front of the TV with Alistair as he did his lap of honours around Leeds and won there. So yeah, so they're the reason. That's the kind of that's the other side of work that a lot of people don't see or don't hear about, except as I said, the team every so often will hear about it. So then, in terms of kind of career and progression and things like that, I started off coming from the west of Ireland, and I came over to the UK to study. So I did a lot. One of the sports I did, and I was actually kind of okay at, was swimming. So I was over to the UK a lot when I was younger, and travelled around a lot. So I loved it. I loved the UK. It was very different from the small town I came from in Ireland, and I wanted to try and essentially escape from that and do something different. So I came over here to study pharmacy, did that for 4 years, qualified as a pharmacist, and then worked as a clinical pharmacist in a hospital in St Jimmy's in Leeds and in Guy's and Tommy's in London as well for a couple of years, where I was a non-cold pharmacist and things like that. And I loved it at first in terms of kind of that, helping people, and I loved science and, how the drugs worked and things like that, and seeing people getting better and having some small part to play in that was really, really very rewarding. But after a couple of years, kind of like the work in the NHS was really great, like, because the amount of extra effort that goes in to get things done in terms of teams putting together, working overtime, harsh conditions, it's all very true, and on the ground it's very, very tough. But I felt kind of that my mind was wandering. There wasn't really any opportunities for development. There wasn't any scope change. And kind of what I was doing almost on day one was what I'd be doing, in 30 years' time, and that scared the hell out of me. So at the time, I had friends working in the city, working for some of the banks, working for some of the accountancy firms. I couldn't understand what the banks were doing at all. They couldn't really explain it to me, or I wasn't able to get my head around it. My accountancy friends, though, it sounded very kind of, from my point of view, conservative. I knew what I was getting into. There was exams, there was progression. So I kind of applied for that and went and got that. And I didn't think I was going to be able to make the change. I thought changing from kind of a sciencey background into a business background was going to be so alien, and I was going to suck it so badly that I'd be kind of back out and doing pharmacy again, which was absolutely fine to take that risk and, and all of that. But it worked out well, and I loved it, and got on okay, and haven't really looked back at pharmacy ever since. So it's kind of, I suppose, one thing was nice was that ability to make that change. You can kind of do it whenever, if you've got the right motivation behind it, and things like that, give it a good go. The other thing, so I took a lot of things from pharmacy area, but one of the other things I took kind of towards the end was when I came out of the clinical setting, and I started working just to do something and try something different rather than give up on it straight away, working in kind of the typical high street pharmacy, managing a store and managing a team of people. And as a kind of a 21, 22, 23-year-old, that was pretty amazing, kind of going in and having responsibility for 10 or 15 staff, and trying to get my head around managing that, managing personnel, managing kind of little infights and squabbles and rotas and things like that. So that was really kind of in the deep end, line management responsibility. But it was kind of, in a way, it was a baptism of fire, which I kind of later came to realise. So I changed over then, did my Big Four accountancy, went through the exams there, and I loved the mixture of doing exams and theory, and then actually seeing the application of it when I was out of the clients. And as anybody here who's doing auditing will know, the clients change every probably 2 or 3 weeks, and that really suited my background in terms of I like change, I like seeing different things, I like going in and kind of getting to know new people, new businesses, new business models, whole different set of issues and things like that. While doing the exams at the same time, and also as well as the kind of the technical side of that accounting, it was great from a kind of the softer skills side, which was kind of meeting people, speaking to kind of the board level people, and having some very different conversations about what was going maybe wrong or what issues we were seeing, and trying to kind of develop that side of things as well. So that was really good from that point of view. And then after a couple of years, friends of mine had left the accountancy, gone to join other companies. One of the companies they had gone to, some of them had gone to was GSK, and they were telling me about it and saying there was jobs on offer. And at the time, I had kind of done accountancy and numbers for about 3 or 4 years, and I was looking for a change. And what they were offering in GSK was something totally different. You come in with a kind of a financial background, and what they were looking for was kind of interpersonal skills, and also that kind of logical process mindset that could be applied to other areas. So I came in and did something very different, which was looking at selling and marketing, looking at business continuity planning, doing kind of manufacturing process reviews and efficiency reviews. So for about 2 or 3 years, I did anything but numbers, which was absolutely awesome. And in terms of kind of an integration into a business, it was really good because it meant that later on in my GSK career, I had better credentials than, say, a normal numbers accountant, because I'd actually been in the business. I could understand what it was like on the production line. I knew what it was to run a selling and marketing campaign, and what the paybacks we were looking for was like, and all the grey areas. So from a pharmacy point of view, there's so many grey areas in marketing, around the world, that was really an interesting and kind of quite a philosophical debate almost. There was never really a black and white on this, so it was really interesting discussions to make sure teams were doing the right thing and erring on the side of caution and things like that. So I did that for a number of years, and did a lot of work. I think I was traveling 70 or 80% of the time. Kind of two of the highlights during that couple of years was I spent almost a year in America doing something that was really close to my heart, which was when I came into GSK, one of the things that worried me was ethical treatment of animals and animal usage in experiments and things like that. So I kind of kept talking to people about this whenever I got the chance, and then eventually there was a review that was happening, because people remember 10, 15 years ago there was a lot of Huntington issues and animal activist issues. So GSK wanted, or the board at GSK wanted, confirmation that they were doing everything they could to minimise use of animals in studies, and I was absolutely on board with doing that review, and it was fantastic to go around the world to all the research and testing sites and see, obviously on one side very harshly where we had to use animals, never great, but the process to actually get to that point was so diligent. It was almost like a last resort, we have to do this, and everything else was exhausted before you got to that point. So that was really lovely to be able to kind of see that myself personally, and also feed that back. And also as well, just as a smaller point, the care the animals got, in their lives and through this process was quite amazing, in terms of the enrichment they got around the environment they were kept in. So that was really, that was one of the highlights for me, just seeing that and be able to kind of say that, we're doing this the right way, and we're minimising the number we're using as much as possible. So that was an amazing year kind of based out of America, and then I got another year based out of Melbourne, where I stayed on the beach. Flat on the beach. My partner, my wife now, kind of managed to come out as well for a lot of that time. So that was amazing. It was really interesting as well. So some great experiences overseas and travel, and kind of that mix of not just meeting Irish people and UK people, but actually seeing different countries at work, whether it's in Egypt, or the aggressiveness of some Americans, or the formality and customs and the hierarchies that you see in places like China and Japan. It was just phenomenal. And really kind of insightful and interesting, and each one was a bit of a learning curve as to how to manage that, and then, as I said, often, because there's no other point of view, have some difficult conversations towards the end. So after that, then I went on and did some more kind of commercial roles. So each point was kind of, so I was doing financials, then I came into GSK, and I was seeing something off the company, learning about the actual business, ignoring financials, but getting up to speed on research and development and other things. Then I went back into financials, into controller roles, then I went into commercial roles. And then after about several years at GSK, and having kind of built up a good network, I was getting a little bit of what's next. And then I got the opportunity to work external from GSK in a joint venture that they had just set up to look at ViiV Healthcare. And essentially what GSK were doing there was they were they had a portfolio of drugs. So GSK looked after many of things. So they've got cancer drugs, asthma drugs, blood drugs, they had HIV medication drugs. The HIV medication drugs were older, they were about 25 years old. They'd lost their patent protection generally, so they were a declining business. And GSK wanted to get rid of them essentially because there wasn't a future there, or wasn't a value there from their point of view, and they wanted to focus on the areas. So they cleverly packaged it up, sold it to the city and stuff like that, and said we're going to do a trade sale or an IPO or whatever it might be in a year's time or 2 years' time from this. So it got a lot of press, a lot of attention. A management team went in there, and the management team that went in were kind of a dedicated resource on this. And because of the attention that the press were giving it and things like that, they were highly motivated. And because it was potentially a trade exit or an IPO or something. So within, I think, about 2 quarters, the sales on that stopped declining and started evening out, and then started recovering. And then in addition to that, we did some really good corporate finance work. We brought in some new molecules, and those molecules kind of just did fantastic. They were bets, but luckily a couple of the bets we made paid off. And within about, I think, 7 or 8 quarters, the ViV portfolio was probably the most profitable within GSK and was the most talked about. So GSK was going through some very hard times at that point. This was the only kind of light it had. So it was amazing kind of being in that, it was, I think by that point, 2 years in, it was from an IPO point of view, it was a FTSE 50 company, revenues of about 2.5 billion, and being run by about a couple of hundred people worldwide, but obviously a huge GSK support network. So actually, if you include everybody, it was probably 1,000. But it was kind of like very big change for me coming from GSK, where you were literally a cog who would never really see the end point of what you did. So suddenly you were on a kind of a floor with the CEO, CFO, the key medical guy. You heard about everything that was going on, and you could see the end to end. And I loved it. It was just fantastic, and it was highly motivating. And we had a lovely French CEO who was all personality. And any time there was good news, and that could have been a Friday afternoon, the sun came out, he'd go to the fridge and break open a bottle of bubbles. Very, very French, and it was lovely. It was just a nice little touch. So I did that for a lot longer than I've done other roles in GSK. So instead of a year and a half or 2 years, and then you move on in GSK, kind of that's typically what happened. I did it for about 3 years because I enjoyed it so much. During that time, the CFO and the CEO changed over, or well, there was a change in the CFO in particular, and it was really interesting being in a role, and I know some of my team probably kind of have been in the same position, where you're doing the same job, but you've got a different leader, and the difference that makes to a role is just absolutely phenomenal. And there was, even from staying in there longer than usual, the learning that came from that, comparing and contrasting to very highly performing CFOs from a GSK point of view in terms of their management styles. So one was very kind of task focused, one was more people focused, one was, so it was an amazing learning from that point of view, really worthwhile. And then after that, then I got the opportunity, again through contacts I had, to kind of go back into GSK, which was a huge decision at the time because I was loving ViV so much. But from a progression point of view, there was me, there was the CFO, and I was a million miles away from the CFO and what he could do. So, to progress and keep going on and keep things fresh. I went back into GSK to do a change project. They were kind of opening up a shared service model for a lot of functions, HR, finance, and things like that, where they're going to have 3 main centres around the world and taking basically all the market, finance teams, HR teams, and putting them into these specialist areas. So there was an opportunity to go in there and lead a relatively large team, about kind of, I think, 30 or so accountants, and then go through kind of a change process about consistency of process, outsourcing to kind of offshore areas, and things like that. So that was really interesting. But never really settled back in, because it was always that, I felt again back into that cog within the big machine and not really having that hands-on or that kind of visibility at the end to end. So therefore never really settled. Went back in, had kind of objectives I wanted to achieve, and that took about 1.5 years, 2 years, and then started looking for something external. And luckily enough, the timing kind of coincided when Will and James were searching for a new finance person, so it coincided with that, and that's how I ended up at Zipcar. And the reason I wanted to get to Zipcar was because obviously the breadth of experience that it offered, the type of company it was. So GSK, I know, was a great company trying to do very good in terms of curing diseases, helping people, making people feel better. And I kind of, felt something similar around Zipcar in terms of trying to be environmentally conscious and friendly, taking cars off the road. So again, something I kind of believed in. And that's kind of where I am today. So, okay, so that was kind of a very, well, it probably wasn't quick enough, but a run through my career path, and apologies for those who haven't go through this. So the most proud moments I have at work, I think I was kind of proud of making a change from pharmacy to accountancy. It was a big risk at the time. I'd invested 4 years at university, it wasn't easy. And then changing over to do something very different was scary, but it worked. And it can be done, I suppose, as well. So I was kind of quite proud of that. While I was at ViiV, I ran a grant program where we had about 5 million a year to donate and give to programs running out of sub-Saharan Africa. So applications will come in from all the different countries in Africa saying, we have a community program for HIV patients. They need support, they need education, whatever it might be. So deciding on who they might be, allocating the funding, and then going and seeing the communities and seeing the kind of the work on the ground was pretty amazing, actually. So that was really good, and it was as basic as it's so stigmatized in Africa and it's so widespread in some of the countries that people who have it are ostracized by their tribes or communities, whatever it is. And a lot of what we did, to be honest, was just setting up coffee mornings so that people could come and talk about their problems and have somebody to talk to, as opposed to be living, on the edge of the community and things like that. So actually, it sounds quite fluffy and quite, that's not really something. But actually, when you go there and see it and hear the stories about the benefits that people have, and then suddenly, as opposed to kind of, a mum, her husband having leaving her after for whatever reason, for the reason she has HIV, she's on her own with the kids, and then suddenly she's got people she can kind of look to support and get support from, and suddenly be part of a new community. It was quite amazing, quite powerful. So really proud of that. And I think kind of from that then I've gone on to do some other kind of community things. And it goes back to kind of my childhood, where a lot of the sports things I did were done by volunteers, which is kind of how sport was a good thing because it was free. So I could go to the football and there was a volunteer running it, swimming, volunteer running it. So kind of partly that, partly this kind of grant thing, I've gotten involved in some local community things where I live. So looking after things like, so that's just a picture of the grant program. So I help out with the Hampton Pool Trust. I don't know if anybody's from Hampton and the open air pool there. So looking after that. And also randomly, polo is something I've played and saw that there was a lot of rich people who played it. There wasn't really any charity giving. I thought that was an opportunity, so we've tapped into that, and we're kind of getting that member base to give up some of their money and some of their time, and then getting kind of youth groups around London and around the UK involved and giving them the opportunity to come and learn how to ride a horse. And if you're good enough, then play polo and spend a week at a time in kind of camps and things like that. Just something very different. So yeah. So they were kind of my most proud moments. The hardest times were far and away when I worked in the NHS. Getting kind of a call at 2 or 3 a.m. and having to go to the operating theatre and seeing somebody kind of die in front of your eyes, or watching a baby fitting as their parents are standing beside them is quite harrowing, and it's quite scarring. But it's also great in a way, because you come away and anything that happens afterwards, you think, relatively speaking, the numbers don't balance, but nobody's dying. So it's kind of, there's an amazing kind of relativity from that. So whatever else happens, I always kind of think back, wow, it's not that. This is something else. So that's kind of has always stayed with me. And then several times kind of at GSK, especially in the audit environment, having to kind of speak up against some of the leaders, and Maureen will probably know this from a GSK point of view. There are some tough people there, and when you're kind of at the David Pullman level and things like that, they don't like to hear bad messages. And when you are delivering bad messages, the discussions can turn quite heavy and heated, and there were several of those as an auditor that were extremely hard, because you try to do a good job, you try to get everybody on side, you've managed all the stakeholders and agree that the facts are correct. But at the end of the day, if one of the CET isn't happy, you will know about it, and it can cause big problems. So yeah, they were hard moments. But again, relatively speaking, I got shouted at, nothing was dying. So yeah. So then the last point then, in terms of key learnings for me, relationships and people are key. Always try and treat people how I'd like to be treated myself. And then I think one thing I kind of maybe was hopefully coming out when I was talking was a lot of the jobs I got at GSK, and even before GSK, were through people I knew. So networking is a really important skill, and something that really, if you invest in it, it does pay off. And having that ability to kind of have that elevator chat, which is like that in 30 seconds, what are your strengths, where are you coming from, what do you want to do, and then having the questions for whatever relevant area. And that really kind of requires mapping out about, going, who do you want to speak to, where do you want to go, and like me, you might not have a very good idea of it. I wanted to be a pharmacist working in a hospital until I was, in my mid-20s, and suddenly I was like, total change of tack. So you can plan these things as kind of in much detail as you can, or at a very high level. But having those conversations is really powerful because in a way it drives you to know who you are. So things like kind of MBTI, strength training, things like that, it's all very relevant because it feeds directly in to you being able to pitch yourself, around the business and things like that. And like I said, most of the jobs I got at GSK were through conversations, informal chats about me kind of going, don't know about R&D, kind of go speak to you, then find out about that person from somebody else I know, and then kind of go and work in that network, either organically through people I know or inorganically by making just cold calls. So that's kind of like people, relationships, networks, absolutely important. The other thing I have as well is swallow pride. So I'm no rocket scientist. I often make decisions that are wrong. And what I've found is kind of, anybody who wastes time trying to defend incorrect decisions when you know that's terrible. So it's kind of a case of raise your hand, admit it, move on, and then obviously learn from it as well. So I think that's kind of, in terms of just trying to get things done and moving the business forward, that I think is kind of something that I've learned in terms of, if you try and push back or make, escape some way, it never really works. Whereas a quick kind of, absolutely, that's my bad, sorry about it, try and fix it, then move on and learn from it, I think is always a kind of good way to go. Take opportunities when they're offered. So what I found was things randomly popped up and there was never a right time to do it. There was always something else going on, logistically how it's going to work. I've got a rental contract, I've got a mortgage, whatever it is, but in some way they work. The company will help you out, you find a solution to it. So I think kind of taking those opportunities when they pop up is really key, and not waiting for the perfect time, because you could be waiting a very long time. So one thing I kind of mentioned as well, just about resilience, the importance of work-life balance. I think kind of, there's enough work to do 24/7. And if you do that 24/7, I think the quality will suffer. So I'm a big believer in kind of quality, not quantity, and you need to have outside interest or recharge, whether it's family, sport, friends, whatever it might be. So big believer in that. There's one thing I really admire actually about my finance team, is all the guys, whether it's gymming in the morning or hurling at the weekend or the big runs or the climbs. I think that's something I look at the guys and kind of go, I should be doing more of that now. So I think it's something I really admire and something I think is really, really important as well. So yeah. Then know yourself, I mentioned that in terms of networking and being able to tell people succinctly who you are, where you're coming from, what you want, what your developments are. That's absolutely critical, so it is, from a networking point of view and from your own point of view as well. And then that leads on to kind of investing time in the softer skills. So you could be, technical up to the eyeballs, the best person in the world, but if you actually can't communicate or can't influence somebody around it, it's not going to be much use. So that's kind of absolutely key for me. And then the last point is speaking up. I always think kind of I can live with myself better if I see a problem and talk about it or flag it or raise it, or if I disagree with something, say it, as opposed to not. And I think I encourage everybody in the team, and I've got maybe too much in the team sometimes, but I'd always encourage people to speak up and say if they're not comfortable with something. I think, as I said, you can live with yourself a lot better if you do that, as opposed to sitting on it and then something bad happens. Okay, so that is it. That seemed to go on a long time.
That was very good, thank you.
So, sorry.
Yeah. Ladies, are there any questions? Please, let's have some questions for Fergal.
Is that the slowest you've ever drunk a Guinness?
I finished that one off beforehand. But yeah.
So, Fergal, I've got one for you. You've had a really interesting and kind of varied career. What's the most difficult decision you've had to take in your career?
Leaving GSK and leaving the knowledge of the processes and the way things work. Because when you're in a big business like that, it's literally if you're coming in new from the outside, you're blind. And if you don't, you can kind of pick up a process document and read and go, so that's what I need to do. But actually, if you've been there a while, that's not what you do. You go and speak to that person, or you go and speak to this person. And then the network as well that I had at GSK was quite powerful. So leaving that, coming to Zipcar was a huge decision. I think we spoke about it at the time. I think so that was probably the hardest decision. It was a lot harder than taking a bit of a gamble and moving from being a pharmacist, or as a friend of mine used to call it, like being a pill counter to being a bean counter. That was a lot harder because I had a family, there was more on the line, it was later in my career and things like that. Yeah.
And what was your kind of thought process to make that really difficult decision?
Yeah, it was recognising what I'm giving up in terms of the network and what I know and the history I had, like at GSK, which is pretty good. And it was kind of, again, it was that kind of thing in me that I like change, I like to see different things. I was very worried that if I took another job at GSK, I was at 10 years, and then my next job would take me up to 12 or 13 years. And I felt at that point it was kind of the tipping part of being, right, I'm going to be a lifer here at GSK. And that kind of scared me a little bit. I love GSK, I've had great opportunities, but actually I didn't know what it was like to work in a small business, or I had a feel from a Vive point of view, but that was still within the safe confines of the big mothership and things like that. And yeah, so I wanted to be more hands-on, and that was kind of the tipping point. And then meeting people like kind of, sorry not to be, brown nosy, but like meeting people like yourself and Will, that sold me as well. And Will was an atypical finance person. So the people that I'd known at GSK were kind of old school, people who've been there a long time. They wore their pinstripe suits to a degree, and the higher up they were kind of like that old school. So then meeting Will for the first interview, wearing a t-shirt and baggy jeans and terrible sneakers, and I think there was an inappropriate pose at one point where he put his leg over the chair, and I kind of
We've all been there.
What's the offer here? Like, what's happening? Yeah. So that was different. Yeah. So that kind of that was a bit of a sell point, honestly. Yeah. Because he was coming at it from a different point of view, seemed very commercial, and he was very kind of obviously driving the business. And I really got that kind of feel from him. So yeah. So a couple of different things sold it to me. And that's actually one other thing I'd say as well. Like with hindsight now, kind of at this stage of my career, if I was doing it again from an accountancy point of view, I'd absolutely join a smaller company, smaller firm earlier on, because the breadth of experience you get is so much quicker and so much more accelerated than you do if you're working for a big accountancy firm or a big company. So yeah, that's one thing I'd always kind of advise people from now on.
What's next? What do you want to do? What's the next adventure? We can have that conversation in private.
I don't know. It's kind of one of those things. Like I said, I'm not one of those who has a very mapped out career or anything like that. So I'm kind of playing what's in front of me a little bit. And there's a lot going on with us at the moment. That's keeping, things are changing. It's interesting. So haven't had time to even lift my head and think.
What's been the biggest challenge with trying with the polo charity? It sounds really, really interesting and kind of different.
The biggest. So I guess kind of there's two things. There's one very kind of technical thing or a very kind of administrative thing, and actually getting insurance to cover off people who haven't been on a horse before, haven't played polo, or we've got special interest groups, we've got kids with needs. So that's actually getting that cover, negotiating that is really, really tricky. So it is. And then it's kind of actually just setting the concept in the polo community. So some people get it straight away and are absolutely brought on board with it. Some people not so much. They're kind of happy in their closed community and don't want that kind of incurred upon or any other people kind of come into it. So that there's a bit of snobbery, simple as that. So some people are great and very open and happy to help out monetary wise or time wise. Some people absolutely not. They just don't want that to be a part of what their weekend is and where they go to and spend time. So that's quite amazing.
How do you tackle that, the snobby people? Can you guilt trip them? Can you? I mean,
you try.
They should help.
Oh, of course. You try. You kind of show successes from previous programs, and maybe the most powerful thing in the world is when you have one of the kids who's been on the previous program. They can come along and talk to them about what they did before, what they did after. So before they didn't really go to school, they were hanging out in street corners or part of gangs, then and it's not like I'm not talking about kind of like movie like changes, like, but since the polo opportunities, they're kind of looking a bit more at what they're doing, they're trying to be less involved in the gang scene, they're looking forward maybe to the next event, and they have to earn this in some cases. So it's not just a case of your name's picked out of a hat. You've got to why do you want this, what might be good for you, how could it help you, what are the changes that might so they've got to put some effort into kind of thinking about where they are and what this might do for them. And then kind of, we then look for people who've been on the courses before to come back and help the next one. So it's kind of setting them up as youth leaders as well.
Like, ignoring your qualifications, what's your dream job?
No job. I absolutely love music, I love reading, I love movies, I like trying to keep fit, so I would happily...
A college in Donegal somewhere with running around the place reading books.
Oh, you're talking dirty. How did you know? I think there's so much to see and do in the world. Like, I've got piles of books I want to read and music I love listening to. So, don't have a dream job actually.
Sorry.
It'd be something to do with charity probably.
Okay.
I didn't have to.
So you would be working.
Sorry?
You wouldn't be getting a check.
How do you, as a leader in our company, how do you bring the energy that you have for all these things into your leadership, not just to your team, but the rest of us?
I don't know. In terms of the rest, so from a team point of view, what I try and do, and the guys will probably be best to have the comments, is I try to keep things simple. I try to kind of, get things coming in, make calls as to whether that's priority or not, and then pass down what's needs to be done now, and things like that. So I try and kind of, I suppose, act as a bit of a funnel for what gets distributed. And then in terms of the wider business, I suppose kind of offering challenge to people like Mark and Ram, and the leadership team from that point of view, kind of going, why are we doing it this way? Why haven't we done something different? So maybe kind of like some challenges or an outside perspective on some of the things kind of helps as well. Cool.
Happy?
Yes.
As you thought?
Oh, fine, that's grand.
So I really want to thank Fergal because this is actually unbelievably nerve-wracking, and I know how nerve-wracking it is having done it last month. So I really appreciated it, Fergal. As always, completely authentic, honest from the heart, which is what we see from you every day. And I think it's really great for people to hear a bit more about who you are and what you've done.
Yeah, thank you.